Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. A lot of times there can be sort of overhyped trade suggestions. I have not seen any irresponsible reporting by NBA guys. I don't think there's a ton out there. I think DeJounte Murray would make the Lakers better. I don't think he's a game changer. So your thought on what is a pretty quiet trade deadline?
Well, it's interesting because I think the play-in tournament has made it so that more teams than ever are more willing to think within the scope of the current season, which has diminished the number of sellers. And yet there are so many teams that feel close, which has increased the number of buyers. But the problem is the majority of those buyers don't have much to offer. Like the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns would love to have a perimeter defense upgrade, but they don't have any first-round picks to offer, which severely limits their ability to go out and get somebody. The Lakers would love to go out and get an athletic guard, but they have some limitations in that they basically have this one draft pick to offer, and chances are you can't get a really great transformative player for that type of talent. And so in a weird way, even though there are a lot of teams that would like to make a trade, there just aren't that many trades to be made. And so I think that will kind of limit what we see over the course of the next couple of days. Of course, you never know. We'll see what happens before the deadline if desperation kicks in and some stuff starts flying around. But I have a feeling that we're poised for a relatively quiet deadline.
So you follow the entire league. Let's start with the Lakers because that's always been a primary asset of your NBA knowledge. I've kind of rolled my eyes at any suggestion to trade LeBron, mostly because the 5 previous years before him, they had the lowest winning percentage in the league, and he saved the franchise. Ticket sales, merch, intelligence, he's still an elite scorer and distributor. I'm not giving up LeBron for 19-year-olds that may or may not hit and be players. Here's what I view the Lakers as, and you can tear this apart. I view this team as an elite scorer and distributor, LeBron, the best defender in the league in Anthony Davis, an excellent third wheel, sometimes inconsistent, but a good scorer in Austin Reeves, excellent length. That's why they can match up with a Denver. They have excellent length. Could use another shooter. I would love to see him give up a little length to get a shooter, DeJounte Murray. Then I think they would be in the discussion as the third best team in the league. They're not Boston, though the Celtics have no bench, and they just beat them. And they're not Denver. If Jokic, Anthony Davis does about as good a job as you can on him, and he's going to give you 28, 8, and 8 or whatever. But I think the move is a tweak, and I don't think I'm selling the future when I don't know, because of the way the NFL draft works, I get 23-year-olds. In the NBA, I get 19-year-olds. Who knows what they become? I have a much greater sense of a first-round NFL pick than a first-round NBA pick. So my take is, if you could get a shooter, give up a tad length, I think you're arguably capable of beating a Milwaukee, a Phoenix. Is that a fair kind of view of the Lakers?
The Lakers have had such a weird season, but it makes a little bit more sense when you kind of split it into thirds. So they come out the gates and they're actually pretty solid. In spite of the fact that D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves are both struggling, they started 15-9, capped off with winning the in-season tournament, right? Then immediately after that, which was somewhat, our mutual friend Logan Swaim, I was texting him at the time. I was like, I hope they don't just completely fall apart after winning this thing. They go 3-10 over their next 13 games with some bad losses. They lost to a Spurs team that hadn't won in like a month. They lost to the Bulls. They lost to the Grizzlies. They basically let go of the rope, and it does a ton of damage to them in the standings. Well, they kind of circle the wagons, and they get their feet back underneath them, and they're 10-6 in their last 16 games with some impressive wins. They beat the Clippers. They beat the Thunder. They beat the Celtics. They beat the Knicks. They beat the Mavs. They beat the Warriors. So I think, more or less, I'm kind of exactly where I was with this team before the season, which is they're really damn good, but they're not as good as Denver. They're not as good as Boston. And so I think the silver lining and the reason why I would invest in this group is you and I talked about how LeBron and AD in a lot of ways needed to get better, especially on the offensive end, for them to be able to hang with Denver. A LeBron James jump shot last year was worth 0.9 points. A LeBron James jump shot this year is worth 1.06 points. That's an 18% improvement. You've seen that when you watch the games. He's he's executing the Golden State Warriors with pull-up jump shots at the end of games. He just was completely incapable of doing that last year. He had a bizarre shooting slump in last year's season. And then Anthony Davis is having the best post-up season of his career.
Yes.
He's reading double teams better than ever. And so to me, he's been so
great.
good. And so to me, like, you mentioned that core three, Austin, LeBron, and AD. The biggest question mark for the Lakers is the two guys in between. D'Angelo Russell brings a lot of offensive firepower to the table, but you can't play him next to Austin Reeves against good teams. You're not athletic enough in the backcourt. Taurean Prince has been Darvin Ham's favorite player all season long. He is a bench player. Here's a crazy stat for you. He has started twice as many games this year as he did in the previous 3 seasons combined. So he's miscast as a starter on this particular team, although they just recently moved him to the bench. Your opinion there, that bench length, they have all these guys like Rui Hachimura and Jared Vanderbilt who are really good, but they can't really play on the perimeter on both ends of the floor the way they need. And so, bringing in someone like a DeJounte Murray, another guy that they wanted last summer that they didn't get, who I know they're looking for again this year, is like a Bruce Brown, or even like a smaller move on the margins with a team like Brooklyn for something like Royce O'Neal and Dorian Finney-Smith. Getting quality NBA starters at the 2 and 3 will give them their best puncher's chance. But at the end of the day, Colin, like, is Denver just better than everybody? Because that, I think, is what's causing a lot of the reticence here, is whether or not they can even beat them.
So a couple of nights ago, I'm out and Lawrence Frank is sitting next to me and we just chop it up for an hour. And I said, man, was I wrong on that deal? I said, I hated it. I'm like, oh, what are you going to do with Westbrook? He went to the bench, where he's playing about 23 minutes a night and doing really good things in that 23 minutes. Last night, he had a couple of beautiful passes against the Hawks. Kawhi and Paul Lavoie's tremendous two-way wings. They've got size, Plumlee, they've got some size. But I said, you're a beautiful team to watch. The ball movement, they don't have a single player in the top 35 in ball usage, and you can see it. I think they're the most beautiful basketball right now in the league to watch. Jason, the Clippers ball movement, they get a great shot 3 out of 4 times down the floor. They get beautiful shots. They have surging offense with like a Coffey and a Westbrook off the bench. Size, experienced wings, veteran point guard, experienced head coach. And I'm sitting there watching them. I know it's the Hawks, and I know the Celtics probably. No, I'll give them the win over the Celtics. That's a credible win. And I'm watching those 2 games, and I'm like, this offense, you can score your way to a title. There's no Tim Duncan in this league now. Like, you can score your way to a title. Jokic is not a great defender. Milwaukee's not a great defensive team. I think we have to take the Clippers seriously. I think they're a machine offensively. Westbrook deserves credit, and Harden, Lawrence Frank said right now in his career, all about winning. Most coachable guy. So your takeaway on what you're watching with him?
I think with James Harden, we overestimated, I think, going into that deal, how much like his playoff shortcomings really play a role in the regular season, which is they don't. Like, James Harden is still, even last year in Philly, one of the best regular season offensive engines that you can have in the league. That specifically is of great value next to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, because they are both very much tip of the spear type of scorers. If you can get them into advantage situations, they can kill people. Paul George has been playing with like a defender closing out at him most of the season this year. And he's so damn good when you give him that type of advantage, right? And just in general, their overall floor organization with James Harden has just made offense so much easier for them, which was interesting because early on they struggled offensively with James Harden. That took a little bit of time for them to figure out. Now the offense is clicking in addition to the defense, and now they're beating everybody. The other part of it too is when we really look at the Clippers as a regular season team, they've been more on like the Lakers side in years past, where they're kind of just getting through the regular season. And one of the things that NBA history has told us is Denver Nuggets 1 seed, Warriors before Steph Curry sprained his foot, right there with the Suns at the top of the West, the Bucks 1 seed, the Lakers 1 seed, the Raptors a 2 seed. Like, the team that is a veteran team that has talent, that attacks the regular season with like a real ferocity, usually wins the title. And so the Clippers, I think, just from the top down, have approached the season with a lot more urgency this year. And I think that that's a big step in the right direction for them. Now, I want to be clear. There's some question marks surrounding this team. They're 23rd in defensive rebounding. That's usually a big red flag for the playoffs. They also attempt 26 pull-up jump shots per game, which is the second most in the league. And right now they're making them at a really high rate, but we've seen what happens when they lost to Denver in the bubble. That's what happened. Their pull-up jump shots went cold, and they didn't really have another punch at that point. But to be clear, all these teams have holes. Boston has offensive issues. Milwaukee has defensive issues. So it's not like the Clippers' issues are, the only team in the league that has that type of red flag. But the way I look at it, it's one last thing on the James Harden front that I think we didn't properly account for. In Philly, he was getting the best perimeter defender every night. Tyrese Maxey was viewed as the secondary option. They're throwing the forwards at Joel Embiid. He's getting the best guy on the other team at guarding a perimeter initiator. Who are you throwing your best guy at for a perimeter weapon with the Clippers? You're probably throwing it at Kawhi. Who are you throwing your second best guy at? You're probably throwing it at Paul George. James Harden is getting quality matchups every single night. I think just in general, there's lower pressure on him in this postseason. If you actually look back, last season, they were below 500 in the regular season and in the playoffs when James Harden shot below 40%. They did not have that margin for error in Philly for James to have a bad night. With the Clippers this year, they're well above 500 when James Harden shoots below 40%. There's margin for error. James can go off the reservation and they just keep trucking right along. And so I think they just kind of increased their margin for error. They improved their regular season offensive organization. But once again, it will come down to Kawhi and Paul George knocking down pull-up jump shots when they get into the postseason.
Yeah, and then Westbrook comes off the bench where he's often the best guard on the floor. When he comes in at the 8-minute mark, he's only playing like 23 minutes a night. But first of all, he's always been an energy guy. I'm never worried about that. But I think he deserves credit. He just said, listen, Carmelo really struggled to adapt to his role off the bench for like 3 years. Westbrook's like, I'll do it. And when Terrence Mann's your fourth best starter in the starting five, you're like, that's a good team. I think it's a really brilliant point. They're a little bit of a matchup issue. So because Kawhi and Paul George are very similar, I think Paul's the most underrated player in the league. He gets this whole playoff P, and then you go look at his playoff numbers. They're not bad at all. They're not bad at all. So I think he's a really underrated player. And he and Kawhi are very similar players. So you have to pick your poison.